Hey, it's Ed here. A little straight talk this morning. Talk about the rehab industry, the addiction treatment industry. It's a nasty, horrible business because there's so many people out there that should not be in business, and they're only in it for the money, and their treatment programs are ineffective. And if you ever notice, they don't even report their results past 3 months. Some of them don't even report the results 1 day after someone gets out of treatment. Why? Because 95% failure rate. Now, nobody will talk about those numbers. It's kind of whispered around the industry that, yeah, maybe 5%. SAMHSA will say 80% failure rate, but it's more likely that it's higher than that. And then you talk about a couple months ago, I was in Los Angeles talking to Tim Ryan, and he travels around the country speaking on addiction. He was in an A&E special from, what was it called? Dope to Hope. And so he speaks around the country on addiction. He says, you know, unfortunately, out of the thousands of treatment facilities we have in the United States, there might be 50 good ones. Think about that for a minute. There might be 50 good ones. So we have between 30 and 40,000 people struggling with addiction in the United States, and we have maybe 50 good ones. So what are the other thousands of treatment facilities doing? They're doing us a disservice is what they're doing. They're doing the families a disservice. They're giving them false hope. They're giving the addict false hope. Because what they do is they set them up for failure. Because here's how it works. So you go in, you finally get into treatment because sometimes it's a 2, 3, 4, 5 week waiting period before you can even get a bed. So you go in and you spend the first week, the fog is starting to clear. By the end of the second week, the fog's cleared, your head is actually functioning because you've been on drugs or alcohol for so long that you're actually thinking about your life again. But you think to yourself, gee, I don't want to be here. Because that's usually 99% of the addicts do, is they say, I don't need treatment, I don't want to be here, I want to get out of here. By the third week, they're finally going, yeah, maybe I do need help. Maybe I do have a problem. And they finally start working on their recovery. By the fourth week, it's over. They're sent home. Hopefully, they're sent to an intensive outpatient that is, 9 months long. But many times, they're sent home without any tools that will help them stay in their recovery. And I always tell people, I said, true recovery starts after rehab. Rehab only gets you clean and sober. And they call it co-occurring because so many people are struggling with mental illness that may have been caused by their addiction, or their addiction may have been caused by their mental illness. It's, the chicken or the egg, which came first. And it really doesn't matter when you're treating the whole person. But most treatment facilities are not equipped to that, even equipped for that. They, they say they're a co-occurring facility and they treat mental illness. But how can you treat anybody with mental illness and addiction when they're only finally in the fourth week willing to work on their recovery? You can't. So what happens is now they get out of rehab and they may be going to outpatient, but the first time they hit a roadblock or they're triggered or a bad situation comes up, maybe they get out and their boss says, hey, sorry, we can't take you back. We hired someone else, we couldn't wait for you, or you're a horrible employee, or you can't find a job. Now you're depressed, you have anxiety, you may be couch surfing, your parents have turned their back on you, your wife, your father, your husband, who knows, but people may have just turned their back on you. So now what do? Well, unfortunately, many times they go back to self-medicating. They self-medicate to get rid of that pain that It's the new pain caused by the reality that they've royally screwed up their life. But did they screw up their life? That's the other part we have to look at. What caused their addiction? Was it mental illness? Was it trauma, neglect? We don't realize how many addicts out there have been traumatized as a child. There's a study, it was called the ACEs. They studied a couple thousand adults, and they looked at their history, and there's actually an ACEs test that you can take and looks at you've been traumatized, neglected, abused, lived in an alcoholic family, etc., and it scores you and gives you a risk assessment on what your propensity towards becoming an addict. But it also takes into account other health risks. It doesn't just look at addiction. People who have been in traumatic situations growing up actually have more health problems. So it's not just addiction, but that's what we hear. So where do we go from here? Well, we need real treatment. There's a young man that was in a treatment facility recently. He was in there for 28 days. And just like I said, for the first 2 weeks he was in a fog. Second week he started to come out of it, didn't want to be there. Fourth week he actually started to think, geez, maybe I really do need help. He said during the meetings, 8 out of 10 of the people in the meeting were nodding off because they put them on methadone. So how much value do you think they're getting out of that treatment if they're on methadone and they're nodding off during the group sessions, or probably even in their individual sessions? Well, he chose not to, but he did get high a couple of times while he was in treatment. And they do UAs. They test for drugs while you're in there. So if he got high a couple of times while he was in there, why didn't they detect it? Maybe it's because they don't care. They don't care if you get high in there because they're in it for the money. This is a facility that takes a lot of people from prison and jail in lieu of going to prison or jail. So, it's just a paycheck. When he, as he was checking out, the receptionist that was checking him out said, "See you soon." Imagine that. See you soon. And he relayed that to me, and he said, that was a stunning comment. And but she was right, because within a week he had relapsed. And unfortunately, I don't know where his situation is, whether he's gotten back or not. But what treatment needs to be is 3 to 5 years. And I've said this, if I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. It's a long-term treatment. So you get your brain that is scrambled, that because of mental illness, addiction, trauma, the lifestyle that you lead during your addiction, your brain is not your own. Now they say that, a lot of people say, well, why don't you just stop? Well, is an addiction a choice? In the beginning, maybe. But once, you get into a place where your brain is controlled by the addiction, by whatever chemical you're using, whether it's heroin, oxy, meth, alcohol. That is what has hijacked your brain. You are no longer in control of your life. Your addiction is in control of your life. And to rewire that, to get your brain back to homeostasis, it takes time. It may take 6 months before you're actually like, geez, man, I think I got a handle on this. I think that I'm going to make it this time. And but it takes about 3 to 5 years before your brain completely rewires itself, and you're triggered by all of those events. And every time you drive by a liquor store, you go, oh my God. I've been in AA meetings where they say people can't even walk down the aisle in a grocery store that has beer in it because it triggers them. And so imagine that. Everything that you see triggers you. Have you ever seen the movie with Julia Roberts? Ben is back. He's driving down the road with his mom, and he's going, "Oh my God, that house I did this, that house I did that. Oh, I robbed that house." So he's recounting all of these horrible things that he did for drugs. And you got the feeling that he was only telling half of the story. So all of those triggers hit you. The guilt, the shame of everything that you did in your addiction comes flooding back. And it's overwhelming. So you put someone in a 28-day program, you don't give them the tools, you send them out in the cold, cruel world. What do you think is going to happen? It's like cancer. Cancer doesn't cure itself. You know, you have to have proper treatment. Addiction doesn't cure itself. You have to have proper treatment, long-term treatment. You know, there's a book by Norman Doidge. It's called The Brain That Changes Itself. And he talks about how neuroplasticity, which was originally discovered by a Dr. Hebb in the 40s. And he was basically, they said he was a quack and didn't know what he was talking about, but he was right. The brain constantly rewires itself. It's constantly, those synapses are constantly changing. Your neurons are constantly changing. Your brain is rewiring itself. And I tell people, I said, it's like a videotape. Every time you're triggered with something, you go pull a tape and play it of an event that happened before and how you dealt with it. And you probably didn't deal with it very well, but that's what that tape tells you to do, and that's your reaction. And what we need to do is have programs that get rid of those old tapes and replace them with positive, appropriate tools that are going to rewire that brain. So now you're triggered because you drove by a liquor store, or you heard a song, or you scrolling through your phone and you saw a drug dealer's name, which for some reason they don't delete all the drug dealers' names in their phone. It's just in case. Might need it. So now they're triggered, but now they have these new tools, these new tapes. They go play that tape and they go, okay, here's how I handled this 5 times in the past, and it got me through. You know, they talk about 1 day at a time. Addiction is 1 day at a time, but it takes a couple thousand 1 days at a time to actually make a difference. We have 197 people dying every single day of overdose. So we're giving them Narcan, saving some lives, which is great. But what happens with Narcan is it kills their high. Yeah, it brings them back to life, but in their mind, they're like, what the heck did you do? That was a great high. I was really high. I spent good money on that whatever they got high on. You know, those 10 oxys that they took, or the heroin they used, and now they're pissed. They wake up mad because now they're dope sick. They are in a full-blown relapse. They're dope sick. And all they want to do is go get high because they don't want to be sick. And when they say well, it means they want to get high again, because that dope sick is like the worst flu you've ever had in your life. And so the hospital may give them a couple of Suboxones and phone numbers for treatment facilities and say, good luck, hope we don't see you again. But they may say, we'll see you soon. That may be what they're thinking, because that happens all the time. So now they're out on the street again. They go right back to where they were, the last place they got high. And they're sick, and they feel like crap, and they just say, I can't handle this. I need to get high again. So now they're high. That cycle just keeps repeating. So then the other part of this whole thing is Suboxone that I just talked about. Now the company that manufactures Suboxone was just fined by the federal government $1.5 billion because it was all about the money for them. How sick is that? They are taking advantage of heroin addicts and turning into a cash cow. And Suboxone was originally formulated to be something that got you over the withdrawal. So that dope sick, the doctor gave you a couple Suboxone so you could stay well until you got to treatment. But what happened was, instead of a couple week prescription, I have talked to people who have been on Suboxone for 8-9 years. That's not what it's designed for. So you're giving them, which Suboxone is an opiate, so you're giving them a drug that gets them high so they don't get high from something else, which it does work. It does keep them from going back to heroin, overdosing, and dying. But what have we really done for them? We've just traded one drug for another. And I know people hate it when I talk like this because it's, we're saving lives. Yeah, we saved their lives. But they're still depressed. They're still anxious. They still have mental illness. Their family life is a wreck. They can't hold a job, etc., etc. So you see where I'm going with that. So why are we just continuing to repeat that cycle? We don't provide proper treatment. Now, federal government a couple years ago upped it to a doctor can now have 275 patients using medically assisted treatment, which is Suboxone or Vivitrol. But Suboxone gets abused, and they actually test to see how much Suboxone is in their system, make sure they're not overusing it. But so now the doctors have 275 patients, that they're charging, I don't know, $60 a visit, whatever Medicare, Medicaid pays, and the doctor now has a new practice, just prescribing medication. They come in, they see him for 5 minutes. All right, you're doing good. Here's some more, and see ya. Well, isn't that how we got into this place in the first place? Doctors over-prescribing hydrocodone and oxy. Now we're just over-prescribing another medication. So I told you this is gonna be straight talk, and these are things that I say in a piecemeal here and there, but just trying to lay it out. So Suboxone, the manufacturer of Suboxone, got fined $1.5 billion. They still get to sell the drug, and they got their hand slapped. You know how much money they made from Suboxone? And then they created a whole new market out there. More and more doctors are getting into this prescribing Suboxone because it's easy. They don't have to treat anyone. They just have to write a script. So we need to change the way that we treat people. What we're doing is really cruel because we're keeping people in their addiction. We're killing people. 197 people die every single day of overdose. We have 122 suicides every day, and many of those are teens. And now we got teens that are vaping THC. So what are we doing wrong? What are we doing wrong as a society that so many people are having to self-medicate? Well, we're doing a lot of things wrong. We're not teaching kids how to cope with life. When I grew up, you got in a conflict, you went out back, both of you walked away with a bloody nose, and you're best friends again tomorrow. Now, you even look at each other and you're suspended from school. Heck, if you're a bad kid, you don't mind being suspended from school. You don't have to follow anybody's rules. Then we got the whole homeless problem. We don't have a homeless problem. We have an addiction problem. And so many cities are just building more and more shelters. Why? So we can keep people homeless? Why don't you have programs that lift them up out of homelessness? And then we consolidate, we condense all of those homeless in one spot. You know what happens when you put like-minded people in one place? They commiserate, and they develop that they're helpless. They're their thinking is skewed because, see, I'm not the only one. He's homeless, she's homeless, they're homeless. We're all in this together. The world is horrible. And the cities buy into that. They buy into that crap and they say, okay, we just need to build more shelters, more shelters. You know, the city of Seattle is spending reportedly $1 billion a year on homeless. Los Angeles, it's a, you might as well call it typhoid city because of all the homeless and rat-infested camps that there's needles. It was a girl over in Port Angeles. She was 3 years old. She got poked by a needle. Because of the needle exchange programs, nobody keeps their needles. They just throw them down. They go get 10 more because they know they're going to get free needles, free sharp needles, because they only use sharp needles because their veins have collapsed. And so cities are just enabling this. If you want to help the homeless, retrain them, give them skills that are going to build them up instead of just saying, here's another shelter, here's another bed, here's food, here's clothing, but let's keep you at this level. We're not going to get you up to here. We're going to keep you at this level. You know, in Coeur d'Alene several years ago, there was a homeless crisis that they didn't have enough beds. So one of the local business leaders said, hey, it's going to get really cold. We don't have enough shelters. Let's get some army cots from the Red Cross. Let's fill the warehouse full of army cots. So we got 100 cots, filled it. And as soon as the cold snap was done and temperatures got above 30, they shut it down. Guess what? I got a message from someone today on Facebook said that they benefited from that program right there because it didn't enable them. Now they're out of their addiction. They're out of homelessness. They're living a healthy life. Now they're part of the Union Gospel Mission and doing great. So, keeping people in homelessness is cruel punishment because you're keeping them in their addiction. You're surrounding them with other people who are struggling just like they are. And I'm sorry this is a long rant, but I just this is just straight talk. But they're keeping people in their addiction, and that is cruel. You ever talk to an addict and say, do you like being in your addiction? No, it's hell on earth. Because their life exists on finding a place to sleep, finding money to buy drugs, and getting high. Rinse and repeat. That's their whole life. Would you like that to be your life? Why don't we do something that gets them out of this hole that they're in? Instead of just saying, hey, that hole is pretty dark. Yeah, boy, I'm sorry that you're in that hole. Why don't we give them a ladder to get them out of that hole? Or better yet, we go down there in that hole and we get them out of that hole and say, hey, here's what you need to do to get out of that hole. We're going to help you get out of that hole. We're going to give you a place to sleep that's warm and dry. We're going to give you education. We're going to give you the tools to cure your addiction. Well, you can't cure addiction, but we're going to treat your addiction. So now you've given them warm and dry. You've given them treatment, proper treatment for their addiction and their mental illness. Now you've given them training, job skills, and social skills, because if they've been on the street for a long time, they don't know how to deal with people, because you've been exposed to that when they cuss you out because you looked at them wrong or you didn't look at them. So we need to give them those skills that are going to get them up. So I call it get them warm and dry, give them job skills. Now we've given them hope, meaning, and purpose. And until we give them those things, we're never going to solve this problem. And here's the real cynical part of me. Seattle got $197 million in grants for the local economy in 1 year. $197 million poured into that economy from grants. That's money that came from you and I, the taxpayer. So that money is a lot of money to a city, even a city the size of Seattle. So that feeds their economy. It gets people elected. It keeps all the nonprofits going. Do we need all these nonprofits? Do we need a nonprofit on every corner? We have more nonprofits than we can utilize. because one pops up here, they do this service, and they're all overlapping. How about we create technology that actually solves a problem? Yeah, software. We all have one of these. How about we use software to keep them focused on their treatment, their recovery? How about we use software that talks to them? How are you doing today, Ed? You answered that question. We need software that keeps them focused on their recovery, holds them accountable. This software right here, it actually is connected to a counselor, a doctor, social worker, so that everything that person does with this software is captured. If their mood changes, if they're triggered, if they're struggling, they need resources, we can push out information to that person based on their needs that they record in here. So imagine the homeless person using this software and saying, I can't find a shelter. Now we can push out, here's a shelter. I can't find treatment. Now we can push out multiple times a day. Instead of handing out a piece of paper, we can push out what they need. But instead we hand out pieces of paper, we lock them up, we put them in jail, we let them, in Seattle you can have 3 grams of heroin without getting arrested, so we're enabling them. Here's the worst part, we're either enabling them or we're putting them in prison. How about we do something different? How about we give them treatment? We give them hope, meaning, and purpose. We give them opportunities. We train them. We talk about the housing crisis. I was in the building industry, and we couldn't find enough contractors to build houses. And half the time, when the workers showed up, they were too high to work, or they did work. The foreman didn't kick them off the job, but we need electricians, we need plumbers, we need auto mechanics, we need framers, we need guys to pave our streets. We need every kind of trade that you can imagine. But yet we get student loans, for $200,000 to go get a degree in, foreign relations. That's going to take you far. So we need to start giving people skills that are usable. Right now the economy is doing great, and there's a lot of manufacturing companies out there, a lot of trades that they say there's a couple million jobs out there that are unfilled. They can't find people to fill them. You look at on Indeed or Monster or any of the other job boards, and you see hundreds and hundreds of jobs that they're looking for just everyday Joes that want to get to work. So, this has been a long rant, but hopefully there's a lot of good information in here. We need to change our system. We need to use the tools that we have. We use Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and is that helping anyone? So let's use those type of tools, like the one I showed you here, for good. Something that can actually help people who are struggling, bring families together. Our tagline for our company is transform lives and families, because one addict creates multiple addicts. One addict can traumatize an entire family, especially alcoholics. Many of them get violent, with marijuana and heroin, and that. They usually don't get violent, but sometimes they do. And then you got meth. Meth is, the new drug. So that's growing fast because it's really cheap, and it's being imported from every country. China, Taiwan, Mexico is huge. Heroin, oxy, fentanyl, carfentanil, marijuana's coming across the border, and we just don't know how to stop it. But we need to address the need. Why are people needing to self-medicate? If we can figure out how to stop people from self-medicating, cut off the demand, the supply will take care of itself. It's Economics 101. Well, I think that's it. So have a great day. Talk to you soon.